Cześć wszystkim, mam dla Was świetną wiadomość.
Teraz najpopularniejsze kasyno, Win Casino, jest już online.
I to nie wszystko. Dla wszystkich nowych graczy Win Casino daje 250% plus 450 euro na konto. Oto najpopularniejsze automaty z RTP powyżej 98% i co najważniejsze, całe kasyno jest zawsze w Twojej kieszeni. Zainstaluj aplikację, zarejestruj się, płać depozyt już teraz i odbierz swoje bonusy. Powodzenia!
Hi everyone, it's Kino here. Welcome to this Ashtanga beginners class. And this practice is a very intense practice, meaning the Ashtanga yoga in practice. So it's good to take a moment and kind of break down some of the harder variations of the asanas. And today I want to share with you the technique for the 3 Janushirshasana asanas. And these are 3 seated poses that, if you're newer to the practice, can be a little confusing and difficult to kind of understand. So we'll take a moment now to really dive into the technique of these 3 seated asanas. Just to prepare, what I'd like you to do is to come onto your hands and knees, and then let's curl the toes under, and let's start off with 5 breaths in downward facing dog. So let's inhale, let's lift the hips back and up. We'll just start off with 5 breaths here, just make sure the body is at least prepared somewhat, so we can move more fluidly into our Janushirshasana asana. So we'll stay here for 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's switch the gaze forward. Let's cross the feet and come on down to seated. Straighten the legs. Now, Janushirshasana A we'll begin with. We close the right knee joint and drop the knee out to the side, and then the heel comes close to the pubic bone. All right, so now we want the knees to eventually end up with 90 degrees away from each other. So we're kind of trying to remember that geometry of a right angle between the knees. It can get confusing because sometimes the thigh bone doesn't participate in that 90 degrees. So if we move the thigh bone into 90 degrees, this actually takes the knees further than that. So just think about the knees 90 degrees away from each other. Then we might need a little bit of an ankle flexion to keep the contact of the heel to the pubic bone. So the most important thing to work on here is your external rotation of the hip joint, and then moving your torso away from the knee and from the thigh that's in that external rotation position. So that kind of separation will come up over and over again in the Ashtanga Yoga seated asanas. So if you have a hard time closing your knee joint, so if we kind of come back up to our initial entry, if we can't close the knee joint for whatever reason, maybe because of an injury, maybe because the knee is a little, sensitive, or maybe because we have had reconstructive knee surgery, then we want to close the knee just as much as we can, and we can still drop that knee out to the side. If there's any pressure or pain on the outside of the knee, you can hold on to it with your hand, or you can place a block underneath your knee. That also works as well, or a pillow, or anything that you have at home. So we can do an open variation of Janushirshasana. So we never want to force the knee joint into closing. So if this is your variation for Janushirshasana A, the next asanas are going to get a little bit tricky, but there are ways to adapt those as well. So if we go back to Janushirshasana A, let's try that A position on the right side. Let me kind of turn the torso over. This allows us to inhale, prepare, and then exhale, fold. And the place that we're really interested in kind of feeling is to ground through the hip, working the external rotation, and then feeling the portion of the lower back that allows the torso to kind of slide away from the thigh. Now, if we use the foundation of Janushirshasana A, we come up, then keeping the foot, and this is important, that we don't want the foot to be on the outside of the foot like a blade, but you kind of want the top of the foot to be resting into the ground, and this will expose the sole of the foot upwards. This also lifts the heel ever so slightly, and this gives you a good transition to go from Janushirshasana A, as you lift the hips, slide forward, and then you want to aim your pelvis, so you can see that I'm lifting my pelvis, lift the hips completely up, slide forward, keep the sole of the foot up, and then settle the hips right onto the foot. So it's a little uncomfortable, you're a little angled off to the side, the knee comes a little forward. My teacher used to say that now the knees want to be 85 degrees away from each other. So if you find that contact point, then it's a little harder, but you still want to get the torso sliding away from the knee. You can reach both hands forward, they can stay on the ground, or you can reach all the way down Inhale, prepare, and then keep trying to bring the torso over the left thigh or over the opposite thigh. This increases the flexibility and the stretch on the right side lower back as we fold forward, more forward, more forward. Now, when we come out of Janu Sirsasana B, you're going to slide back. Janu Sirsasana B leads us into Janu Sirsasana C. So that same action of moving forward. Now, a couple of different ways to get into this asana. If your toes are flexible, you can reach immediately down without opening or changing anything with the foot or the leg, keeping the knee joint closed, starting with the little toe, the next toe, the middle toe. If you wear rings, that's the ring toe, and then the big toe. And then simply sliding so that the toes all bend. And this works if your toes are very flexible, but if your toes are not very flexible, this is quite difficult to get into in that method. And I'll show you another means to move into our Janu Sirsasana C position in just a moment. So when we're thinking about Janu Sirsasana C, well, the toes bend backwards, the navel draws in, and we lift the torso forward and down. Now, if we work some different entries, let's go ahead and straighten that leg. We've been on that side for a while. We'll cross the feet just to give a little bit of movement through the body. Exhale, chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing. Exhale, downward facing. We can cross the feet, come on down to seated. All right, now let's say we work Janu Sirsasana A. The knee joint doesn't close, so we keep it a little bit open. We can still allow ourselves to fold forward. We can still get a little bit of that torso moving over. Now the next variation, very often what can happen is if the knee joint isn't demanding, there's not pressure on the knee from the external rotation, very often we can close the knee joint. So for example, sometimes it's the external rotation that puts the pressure. So if you can close your knee joint forward, it comes out to the side, there's pain, and you have to keep it open, then you can try this for Janu Sirsasana B. We can keep the knee joint closed and actually almost sit on the foot forward. So we can keep the knee joint completely closed and forward. It's just like we're folded forward almost. And we're not going to worry about that 85-degree angle. So this is another option to consider if keeping the knee out to the side is not accessible. Then we can begin to fold forward. You can still get a little bit of that stretch through the lower back as we're still moving the torso away from the thigh. It's not exactly going to be the same as all the way out to the side. Another option, for example, if your foot is not so flexible, if we're in the Janu Sirsasana A position and you come up and there's a lot of pressure on the ankle, is instead of letting the sole of the foot kind of turn up like this, is to actually point the foot over. This can sometimes give you a little bit more negotiation space when you actually sit on the foot. Now, let's look at a few other alternatives for Janu Sirsasana C. In Janu Sirsasana C, if you can close the knee joint a little bit, and your toes are relatively flexible, you could reach under and start to bend the toes back and actually just place the toes in the position and then scoot lightly forward. When you're working Janu Sirsasana C, you don't ever want to push the knee to the ground or try to forcefully move with the hands. Instead, let the movement come from the hip joint as you move into the asana. None of this is accessible, but you can close the knee joint, but when there starts to be torque on the knee, you feel a little pressure. This is a nice alternative, one that I actually really enjoy, is we can close the knee joint at about a 45-degree angle, pivot forward until there's a little weight in the base of the big toe, and you could stop there. Or you can pivot a little more forward, putting the weight from the pelvis into the heel until you can come all the way over, and this really works the ankle, the toes, and helps you get into the essence of what part of Janu Sirsasana C is all about. So let's kind of bring that down. Let's cross the feet, and then find your way back, plank, and chaturanga. Inhale, upward facing. Exhale, downward facing. Let's cross the feet, come on down to seated. Okay, so in the Ashtanga Yoga method, what's most important is that you connect breath, body, and mind. When we're connected, this means that you're also in tune with what works. Sometimes our bodies are flexible. Sometimes our bodies are not so flexible. And this varies day by day and, of course, body to body. So you want to respect what your body is presenting you with and find an alternative or an adaptation of every asana. So you're going to take that methodology of breath, body, and mind as really the essence of what Ashtanga Yoga is. And then this will really allow you to go deeper into the practice. I hope you found this breakdown of Janu Sirsasana useful, and you can apply it when you dive into the more complete practices of the Ashtanga Yoga method. Thanks so much for joining me on this Ashtanga Yoga breakdown. May you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you be filled with love.